The opinions expressed on this show do not necessarily reflect those of Talk Radio AM 640.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Roger, backup clock is started.
Extreme radio for extreme times. This is A View from Space with the Spaceman on Talk Radio AM 640.
I'm the Spaceman. This is AVFS. I'd like to welcome you in right now if you're listening to the radio station, Talk Radio AM 640. Or if you're at work now, maybe listening via the Radio Player Canada app, I welcome you in. Or if you're maybe picking me up free on Apple Music, I welcome you in also. Or maybe you're what some call the best seat in the house, sitting in front of your Mac, your PC, at home. Logged on to 640toronto.com, the website there, picking up the live audio streaming. I welcome you in. Wherever you are in the world, I welcome you in. It was just as the Spaceman said. That's what a lot of my emails have been stating over this past week. As Donald Trump dominated the Illuminati-controlled mass media all this week with his 5-country, 12-day Asian tour well underway. In Japan, South Korea, he appeared as though he was an arms salesman, which in fact he was. Threatening the region with his all-nuke North Korea talk, Trump stated in Japan that it could protect itself by buying U.S. arms. He punctuated that even more by going on to say that he was very, very disappointed that Prime Minister Abe didn't shoot down those missiles that North Korea lobbed over Japan recently. Then later during that Japanese visit, Trump, standing right beside Abe at the Akasaka Palace, I believe it was, during that visit, Trump said he will shoot down those missiles out of the sky when he completes the purchase of lots of additional military equipment from the United States. The Prime Minister, as he should, is going to be purchasing massive amounts of military equipment from the United States, which means a lot of jobs for us, he said, and a lot of safety for Japan. The arms salesman did that in South Korea, too. While on his China stop, a false face was projected in the Illuminati-controlled mass media. Everything reported was super friendly, super respectful. A total reversal, of course, of what Trump had been conveying about China, well, going all the way back since the U.S. election campaign last year. The relationship between Trump and Xi was described as even a bromance, a love affair. In truth, it's far, far, far from that, let me tell you now. What you saw of Trump in China was 100% spin with Xi. Real fake news. Even the deals announced by Xi and Trump were old deals. Done last year, or even the year before, but were officially announced as new deals to the world with this meeting. There were no new deals between the U.S. and China during his stop there. But what did happen? China announced I would call a threatening announcement to the United States. They announced this week it's going to be opening up their investments from outside countries, and you can control some of these Chinese companies now because they're going to allow you to invest in up to 51% controlling interest in banks in China and the securities exchange businesses. Now, you can be sure the European Union will be the major player there, not America. This is a sign of the crumbling of the American empire, which will create a void, of course, to allow China to become the economic engine of the world. Just as I've been telling you all along, China now allowing banks to be 51% owned and securities exchange companies owned, controlling interest by foreigners. The economy is going to take off with the cheap labor. Hence, it was just as the Spaceman said, emails started pouring in. And this Trans-Pacific Partnership Trump's already pulled America out of was a bust, period, too. They even had to change the name because America isn't involved in it anymore, and it was the greatest economy in the world no longer. It was the most important partner in the TPP before it. It is no longer. Now it's Japan as the greatest economy there in that pact, and Canada, who did not sign. So the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, the CPTPP now is what they're calling it, because they can't call it what they had before, the Trans-Pacific Partnership. There's no America. Canada hasn't signed. Why? The North American Union is coming. You're not doing a deal with Pacific countries. You're doing a deal with America and Mexico. The North American Union is on its way. That's why there was no signing of this. I don't care what they'll tell you in the Illuminati-controlled mass media. That's the reason. But China, allowing up to 51%, that's controlling interest in their banks and securities exchange businesses. Yes, even Canada backed off from ratification of that deal. In fact, only 6 countries have already said that they're all in on this new comprehensive and progressive agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership. No deal for the West. You can see them all picking sides now. Yes, the world is teetering on a sea change to all economies. All. That's why all of these trade deals are going sour. Trouble everywhere is the message sent here by the Illuminati this week. And when the countries are in deep, deep, deep debt, as they are, self-inflicted trading roadblocks included, they always do one thing. And one thing only, if you check history. They mobilize. What's that, you say? They get ready for war. And what's happening in the Middle East right now? Iran gaining more and more influence in the area. Lebanon has just had its prime minister resign. He didn't announce it in Lebanon either. He did it in Saudi Arabia. He said he was afraid for his life and fled. Some say he was actually held hostage by the Saudis and made to make that announcement in Saudi Arabia to Lebanon. Prince Salman, believe me, the new leader, is on board with this elite's plan to destabilize the Middle East even further. After wars in Afghanistan for years, Syria now for a long time, and now Yemen, the next war in the Middle East will even be bigger. It's the Spaceman. This is Talk Radio, AM 640. And I'm just getting started. I'm the Spaceman. This is Talk Radio, AM 640. I communicate my email, as you know, space@640toronto.com or spaceman@640toronto.com. Thank you so much for the ones that you've sent. I really appreciate it. This was a very, very hot week. Believe me, they're getting ready. With this new kid on the block, this new Saudi leader, Prince Salman, actually there's 3 generations at play here with the leadership of Saudi Arabia changing all of their rules. Yeah, more sea changes over there too. You couldn't get the old 80-some-year-old Saudi King Salman to do it. His generation is just not there. And of course, the prince that was in line next for the throne, the older of Prince Salman, was bypassed for the younger one who was a millennial. The older one, educated at Sandhurst American colleges the old way. Prince Salman living in a bubble. The millennials never knew a hardship. He could bring change because everyone would recognize that the younger would bring in the newer idea, and this is how they have destabilized that whole area, including Saudi Arabia's population. And they have this war going on now with the Yemen. Yes, the next war is going to be even bigger than Afghanistan, Syria, or this Yemenis fiasco. It's all leading up to the implementation of what's supposed to be the solution for all of this trouble in the Middle East. And what's called the two-state solution. Give the Palestinians their land. Create a new Israel. It'll be seen as an end to all strife in the Middle East. Will it, in fact, be the only deal, the biggest deal of them all, that Donald Trump will actually make? Because his tax reform is not going to. Notice the stock market stalled now. No more record setting after the bill. The facts, the details have been shown. Why? This will never pass. The stock market is in for, well, what they call in the business world a correction. I'm going to call it a crash. So you see, that's why we've seen all of these threats from Kim Jong-un coming on strong. I mean, not just 1 or 2 or 3, like many this year, with Trump standing up to him toe-to-toe. And then Trump showing up in that region, selling Japan weapons to build up Japan's weaponry and their military might, who, by the way, have always vowed since Hiroshima and Nagasaki they'll never, ever have another military build-up. They hate war, staying away from it. They'll never be an aggressor. Well, guess what? This week, it began. Japan is going to be one of those armies that will be sent into the Third World War. This, of course, happens after the two-state solution blows up halfway through its tenure. I believe it's going to be a 7-year pact. And America, the dying, crumbling empire. Just as Remembrance Day services around the world were being held, the U.S. Pentagon announced this week what essentially amounts to the formation of a new level to the United States Air Force. A fighting force in near space. this time. Forget about military area of the sky for operation between 50 and 65,000 feet. This is the weaponizing of space that was announced this week. A new arm for the United States Air Force, empowered with a new $700 billion budget, just granted them, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. You may know it as DARPA. It announced it was partnering with Boeing to build a prototype for its unmanned XS-1 space plane program, they call it. The company who's secured the contract, based in Illinois, bringing lots of jobs, of course, they won the competition with their design it calls the Phantom Express. It's an unmanned XS-1 space plane program. This is the Pentagon moving ahead with a project to develop an experimental, reusable space plane. The U.S. military hopes the new design will help reduce the costs of launching satellites into space and wiping out the dependency on foreign suppliers for space missions. Russia. DARPA and Boeing have been planning this for a while, to build and fly the first of an entirely new class of hypersonic aircraft that would bolster national security by providing a short-notice, low-cost access to near outer space. The program aims to achieve a capability well out of reach of any other country, with the ability to launch low Earth orbit within days, as compared to the months or years of preparation which is right now needed to get a single satellite into orbit. The primary requirement for the XS-1 technology demonstrator, the ability to lift a 3,000-pound expendable payload into low Earth orbit, an altitude of anywhere between 99 and 1,200 miles up. Forget about military aircraft flying at around 65 plus. That's 65,000. No, this is near outer space. More importantly, the Pentagon wants aircraft-like performance from this bird, with the ability to conduct at least 10 flights in 10 days. Quick turnaround. It's like the shuttle, right? Yes, the new bird will have the capability of taking off vertically without the need for a large booster rocket, but as the shuttles used to have, but yet land like the shuttle, a conventional aircraft. A little like NASA's now retired space shuttle, as I was saying. This would make it much more capable than the Pentagon's current super classified, super secretive experimental mini space shuttle. It's called the X-37B. You probably have never heard of it because you just don't go there. It's one of the places I go. The X-37B, totally secret. From what I heard, it launches on top of a conventional rocket. Strictly classified, as I said, but believed to be flying as an orbital test bed for advanced technology sensors and other systems. And the U.S. Air Force provides almost no details on the spaceplane's missions or what they're trying to accomplish with it in near-Earth orbit, or how much it cost. But this new XS-1 that was announced this week is an improvement on this old X-37B. Now, you must suspect, as I do, that the lessons learned from the unmanned autonomous X-37B, which they've been operating for a while, which has actually been out there for years with a few official explanations of its actual missions, have gone into this new Phantom Express XS-1 that's to be built in Illinois. So they've done a lot of work, testing. Now they've got it into a perfected vehicle, the XS-1 they call it, announced it this week. And there's obviously a parallel black project to follow it. Or it's probably already underway, I would suspect. And probably at the famous Area 51 test site. This new capability that the United States will have, it will allow the U.S. Air Force to deploy satellites, or even what I believe to be the real use for it, the more important use for it, to destroy other countries' satellites. Because remember, when you go to war, if you want to win, you've got to control the skies above the battlefield. The idea is to control the airspace above the battleground. This new weapon, the XS-1, deployed in near-Earth orbit, will afford that capability to the U.S. Imagine taking out the enemy's satellites, destroying their sight. Because that's what a lot of satellites are used for, spying on the Earth. Take their eyes out, as well as their communication devices for coordinating in battles, so they can silence the communication from from air to ground on the enemy, and they can take away their ability to see. All this with the XS-1, announced today. And you can't tell me for a moment that you don't honestly now believe, if you're a regular listener to this show, that there's an ongoing conspiracy to take over the world by installing a one-world government. What if I told you one of the biggest vehicles to sell this conspiracy is the world's best-selling book of all time, selling more than 100 million copies per year, at least in the past, and is totally based on this conspiracy. The King James Version of the Bible, the Torah, the Quran, all mention the Antichrist to come, the evil one. The Quran calls it the Al-Masih ad-Dajjal. The Christians call it the Antichrist. If you're not a practicing Christian and have no real knowledge or understanding of the Bible, and if I told you that the Bible teaches about a timeless cosmic conspiracy, it would most likely come as a big shock to you. Why? It's not even well known inside the church, much less the secular world. So why is it that the Bible mentions this spiritual conspiracy that operates from the spiritual realm, but no one in the church talks about it as one, as a conspiracy? Let me see if I can explain that, and then say what I think the conspiracy is all about next. It's Talk Radio, AM 640, ZBFS. I'm the Spaceman. I'm the guy to call the Spaceman. It's Talk Radio, AM 640. You can email me at space@640toronto.com or spaceman@640toronto.com. And thank you so much. I appreciate the one that you've sent. Now let me see if I can explain why it is that inside the church it's not a well-known conspiracy, much less to the secular world. But why is it that the Bible, Quran, Torah mention this as spiritual conspiracy that operates from the spiritual realm? I'm going to explain it, and then I'll say what I think about what the conspiracy is about. Also, I'll point out how to recognize the conspiracy that's embedded in the news stories every day. The Illuminati's goal, through their Luciferian plan to introduce a one-world government so that their Messiah can be introduced to the entire world, the Savior. The last thing people want to do at the church, unfortunately, is to think for themselves because of our hectic pace of living in the Western world. It's been so incredibly sped up by technology. It's made people mentally lazy. We don't even have the energy anymore to will or to think for ourselves. We now just want to be told what to think. Look at the screen and go, oh my God. It's just easier. Christians want to be told what to do. Christians don't mind doing something. In fact, Christians want to do something as long as it doesn't involve the exertion of the mind, doing research on a subject. Logical analysis, checking facts, knowing history. That's just the state most people find themselves in after a long, hard work week, right? So who are the Illuminati and their connections with other groups within the Satanic hierarchy working to bring about the rise of the Antichrist? The moment the word Illuminati is spoken, the person who said it is immediately categorized as a conspiracy theorist or a nut job, some crazy wacko, a metal case. Matter of fact, most people, especially in the United States, are totally blinded by this conspiracy through their education system, their indoctrination, their into patriotism. Of course, the most powerful tool, the Illuminati-controlled mass media, that a worldwide global conspiracy actually exists, denied by them, laughed at. Yet they constantly, every day, inch closer and closer and closer to that, in fact, desired end of a one-world government, a world with no borders. Most people think there is no conspiracy by any group to conquer the world. Oh, yeah, except for one since 9/11. They think maybe those Islamic radical fundamentalist extremists might be vying to conquer the West for Allah. So what's really disturbing is the fact that most of those who are truly Christians, believers in Jesus Christ, are equally oblivious to the fact that there is this Luciferian conspiracy that exists. Why is it then that Christians are so ignorant of this spiritual warfare that's going on, this constant war between the Creator God of the universe and Satan? This war has manifested itself into our real, physical, human, third-dimensional world right here on Earth as we know it and perceive it. So what's going on? Why are Christians so completely ignorant of the facts that Satan is infiltrating our world in a covert way that uses secrecy and conspiracies? It's because the church itself isn't teaching the scriptures and teaching sound biblical doctrines. Instead, there are divisions between the Catholic Church, the biblical doctrines, the liberal Protestant denominations, the evangelical Protestant denominations, the fundamentalist Protestant denominations, plus the charismatic movement, which gets into whole other areas. Thinking it will become real, just visualizing it, is in with these charismatic movement guys. They are the variety of heresies. What kinds of heresies? A lot of churches are filled with ceremonial religious ritualism, legalism, praise and musical worship, as well as a prosperity gospel or a pop psychological selfishness pretending to be purpose-driven. Guys like James Dobson focus on the family. Rick Warren, author of a Purpose-Driven Life, and many others, push that in that direction. They're attempting to give people a purpose by convincing them that all Islamic nations want to destroy their way of life. There's been a subtle change for churchgoers to be entertained. shamed, degraded, yelled at, sermonized to, and anything else that pretends to be worship when they attend church. But in reality, they just call it what it is. Vanity. The Illuminati have gained control of the World Council of Churches and is programming its people to rise up against Islam. The Crusades are coming back, never really went away, but they're going to come back, manifesting itself physically one more time. There have been 20 crusades throughout history. The 21st is on the way. Third World War. Satan and his forces have been running the show on Earth since the days of Nimrod, right up until now. You're not just supposed to know or realize this. You're not also supposed to realize that all of the United States presidents were, and now, and still are, under the power and control of the Illuminati. The Satanic force is the same entity that revealed itself to the ancient Sumerians and to Nimrod as a goddess known in the beginning as Inanna. And one language, and by Ishtar in another language. She's portrayed in many idol statuettes and holding a torch lamp, illuminating the way, you see, for her brother, the Babylonian sun god Utu, also known as Shamash. Or other statues of her holding what looks like a couple of cups. The goddess was the chief goddess of Babylon in ancient times and held a lot of different descriptive titles which described her status. Diana, Queen of Heaven, the mother of the harlots, the goddess of love. Venus, fertility, the goddess of fertility, the goddess of war, the goddess of freedom, liberty, the goddess of immigrants, the goddess of justice, the goddess of commerce. Yes, today, Ishtar, Isis, is deeply involved in our conundrum here on Earth. The goddess of the evening star, Venus' temporary home. Sirius is a permanent home for Ishtar. She's also known as the Holy Harlot, the Perpetual Virgin, and the Black Virgin. The religious doctrines of Ishtar were called mystery doctrines because the religion of Ishtar was called a mystery religion, and in fact was the chief mystery religion, along with the mystery religion of Baal, also known as Mars, Marduk, Merodach, and Baal, and other languages, as well as the mystery religion and the Babylonian sun god called Utu or Shamash, as I mentioned. This means that Ishtar is the woman being described in Revelation, King James Version of the Bible, chapters 17 and 18. Ishtar is the goddess of the future end time, one world government called Babylon, or incorrectly by some as Mystery Babylon. The word mystery in Revelation 17, verse 5, is not part of the name Babylon, but it is a description of this system of government, Babylon, because Ishtar and her religion is a mystery religion. The fact that her title is mentioned within the verse is as the mother of harlots indicates the entire chapter is speaking of Ishtar, the chief goddess of Babylon. It says that Ishtar, who holds a world ruler rank in the satanic realm, is in control of and is the idyllic symbol of a superpower nation of the last days. Remember now, through the ages, the satanic being was adopted by other nations, which changed the name and some of the beliefs. In Assyria, Canaan, Phoenicia, she was known as Ashtoreth. Isis in Egypt, Astarte in Greece, then later changed to Aphrodite. She was called Libertas in very early Rome, about 600 BC to about 100 AD. Changed to Venus during the peak of the Roman power around 480 BC and 400 AD. Venus focused on all, or most of at least, Ishtar's rules, while Libertas basically focused on the liberty or freedoms. You now know what she's called in our day, don't you? She's called the goddess of liberty. Isn't that what the Illuminati are doing wherever they invade? We're going in there to give them their freedom. We're going in there to liberate them. The Statue of Liberty, the symbol of America and their harbor, is Ishtar, a gift from the French Grand Orient Temple Masons to the Masons of America in celebration of the centenary of its first Masonic Republic in America. She's holding the Masonic torch of enlightenment, also referred to back in the 1700s by the Illuminati Masons as the flaming torch of reason. The torch represents the sun in the sky. They're sun worshippers. The Statue of Liberty's official title is Liberty Enlightening the World. The cornerstone of some statue records. How it was laid in a Masonic ceremony. It's incredible. It's all there for you. If you know your history, you can see right through it. This is Spaceman. It's Talk Radio, AM 640. More next. I'm the guy that call a Spaceman. It's Talk Radio, AM 640. Email to spaceman at 640toronto.com or space at 640toronto.com. Thanks for the one you've sent. Touched a nerve, of course, tonight, because you see, there are people that believe inherently in every single word of the Quran, the Torah, and the King James Version of the Bible, that it is indeed their God's word to the letter, and it's never been changed or played around with by man. But so often, I have done the shows in the past showing you how the Bible has been changed through time. Look at what they're changing now. Pope Francis is just about to hand out condoms. Believes in aliens. And you see, it's still undergoing changes to the point where now no one really knows what the actual truth really is and what has been, should I say, redacted or changed by man. And the rewriting of the Bibles. There's so many of the Bibles. You see, you can no longer accept the book as the inherent Word of God. And I'm not saying there is not truth in some of all of this, but it's certainly not inherently God's word that's never been changed, because I know for a fact that it has. Man has so often grabbed a hold of a religion, promoted it, forced it on people, and then controls them with it. Take Islam. Two major sects, really. Sunni, Shia, or Shiite. Iran controls the Shiite. Saudi Arabia controls the Sunni. They're in a proxy war right now. That's in Yemen. That's going to get larger. Smith started Mormonism. L. Ron Hubbard started Scientology. Man controls masses through religion. You can get them to go to war and kill one another over it. That's what's going on today. You can believe it or not. It's the greatest conspiracy never told by the Illuminati-controlled mass media. The Satanic conspiracy begins with Genesis chapter 6, the introduction of demons. who begin relationships with humans that ends up in the development of false religions in Babylon. Way back then, this relationship is interrupted temporarily by the great flood of Noah, which, by the way, the anniversary of is coming up, the 15th of this month. It's in 4 days. Yeah, they actually have a date. November 15th was the date of the great flood. Began raining. After the flood, it starts again with Nimrod and his rise to power and the return of satanic forces called demons, and the full development of not only the return of satanic forces called demons and the full deployment and development of not only demon worship, but of crossbreeding experiments that begin again between these spirits and the human females. Some crossbreeding apparently is accomplished by artificial insemination means in the time of Noah, but later progresses to a literal physical sexual interaction using the religion of Ishtar, the goddess of love. This information is based on the Sumerian royal records of Babylon, by the way, as well as the Old Testament based on the Sumerian royal records of Babylon. And the Old Testament Hebrew words, like the Anakim, the Old Testament Hebrew word Anakim. I know, very, very, very close to the Star Wars trilogy, which is so big, so brainwashing, because it's the plan laid out in a very, very complicated manner. But one of the characters in Star Wars is Anakin. This is Anakim with an M. A Hebrew word picked up in part from Sumerian dialects, which referred to later offspring which were known to be part human and part demon. The Illuminati believed that they were fathered by Satan himself in the Garden of Eden, as it started there with Cain. There were quite a few of these hybrids known as Anakim in the Hebrew, living in Canaan at the time of Moses and Joshua before Israel invaded the land of Canaan. This is written in, as I said, where it starts. The greatest conspiracy never told. This is a record that's been placed in these religious books. Numbers 13, verse 33, where it states that Anak, or the root of Anakim, were the same as the Nephilim, which is the word used in Genesis 6 for the offspring that came about from the intermixing or crossbreeding between Benaiah Elohim, sons of God, and human females. These Nephilim were described as being very, very big, tall, giants, in fact. Apparently some Anakim were still around during the early years of King David before his ascension to the throne of Israel. Remember, he killed the giant known as Goliath, who was an Anakim. They were also known by another name, the Rephaim. Benaiah Elohim only is found in one other place in the Bible, Job chapter 2, in which Satan and the Benaiah Elohim are making what is led on by the text itself as a routine appearance before the throne of God. Making a routine appearance. Getting the voice, getting the audience standing before the throne of God. Notice that in chapter 1, verse 6, and chapter 2, verse 1. It's written, and Satan came also with them. Right there in the throne room. Pictured on an old coin mold. It was an ancient Babylonian coin. Babylonian Ishtar temple is on the back. The coin has an image of the goddess Ishtar, of course, which strikes you right away of how tall she is. She's giant-like. Satanic superhuman demons have been operating throughout the ages in one form or another for a long, long time. On this third dimension, we're told, they're found all over the pagan religions. It was mostly through the different religious priesthoods and priestesses hoods that Satan's world ruler demon kept almost total control of human governments, almost total control of all nations and empires. A lot of satanic mystery doctrines were also in the Greek versions of Babylonian mystic religious doctrine of Ishtar, Baal, Utu. These beliefs and rules were encoded in the Pythagorean mysticism and Gnosticism that he spun. It was found in the Egyptian version of Ishtar, known as the goddess Isis to the Egyptians, the Egyptian name for her. Gnosticism, by the way, if you weren't sure, is a religion that views matter as evil and freedom is gained through knowledge. This is why Freemasonry has many levels. Knowledge. Each level you are given another certain spate of knowledge. Until, if you succeed, you get to the level where all is revealed to you at the top. By the early church period, this Gnosticism of Ishtar battled through the early church fathers for control of the church. The result was, now when I say control of the church, I mean control of all the people. A few controlling the masses through religion. The result was that the subtle Ishtar's beliefs slowly worked their way into the church, a little bit at a time here and there. And this is especially true for merging the pagan holidays with key dates of early church and Jewish feasts. Listen to me when those holidays come around. I tell you about them every single year. The Gnostics were the main enemies of Christianity because they believe that you can become God just by learning knowledge, the right knowledge. And Christianity believes you have to have faith in Jesus Christ. They blend the Christian doctrine with Ishtar doctrine. Knowledge, kept as a mystery by the Greeks. Over the next few centuries, those same Gnostic beliefs began to creep slowly into the thinking of the church right around the time of the Middle Ages. At the time of the Crusades, Rosicrucianism took off, especially the elite rich, and also, of course, within the military defense community of Europe. It was called the Order of the Rosy Veritas, or the Rosy Cross, or Rosicrucians. Same idea. Learn, gain the knowledge, become a god. A movement devoted to esoteric wisdom with emphasis on psychic, spiritual enlightenment. This became the first mainline continuous group that became the forerunners of Freemasonry. Freemasonry, of course, traces its roots all the way back to ancient Egypt, of course, and the Egyptian mystery doctrines of Isis. Babylon's name for Ishtar translated into Egypt. This is where you see the roots of Masonry developing, with its basis seemingly starting deep in Egyptian history. But if you do the research, you will find it ultimately goes all the way back to ancient Babylon. Believe it or not, it does. This is Spaceman. It's Talk Radio AM 640. Much more. And it's all next. I'm the guy that calls Spaceman. It's Talk Radio AM 640. Emails to space640toronto.com or spaceman at 640toronto.com. When the Reformation came along, it shook up the church mightily. Martin Luther King. Martin Luther was the original. And Martin Luther was the man that headed that Reformation. And it shook up the satanic hidden control program over man through the church. The Reformation apparently changed the satanic strategy even. But even that wasn't enough, as it would seem historically either. There's research that strongly suggests that Martin Luther, who was a key reformer, was in reality a member of the elites, the Illuminati. Luther was a Jesuit priest. Jesuit order was part of another satanic segment which, at first glance, seems to be at war with both the Reformationists and the Knights Templar, who were excommunicated by the Catholic Church during the Crusades, alleging they were into satanic worship. I believe the Templars were just one part of the satanic plot for control of the Church. There was another. The other was the Jesuit order, with pretty much the same goals as the Templars. There is now a Jesuit Pope in power. Within the Jesuit order was their Templar version called the Knights of Malta. Once the Reformation began to spread, satanic forces began working on a segment of their overall master conspiracy plan. This plan called for subtle, behind-the-scenes control using a three-pronged mystery religion that mixed Christian, Islamic beliefs, along with Jewish ones to create a new non-religion religion. It's called Freemasonry. Satanic forces created a holy bloodline long before this, which was secretly said to be the bloodline of Jesus Christ, this holy bloodline. Now, this royal bloodline, along with a lot of other beliefs now found in the secret elements of Freemasonry, are also used earlier by the Knights Templar. These Knights Templar were the ones that captured Jerusalem and controlled it during the Crusades. They began a lot of the secret mysteries, including the bloodline of descendants of Jesus and Mary Magdalene, that alleges they actually had Jesus escape the cross. He marries Mary Magdalene. They have children and never died on the cross, but lived in secrecy in France. And this bloodline, these children, the offspring of Mary Magdalene and Jesus Christ, became the royal houses of Europe. This out of the holy bloodline will come the Antichrist. Dan Brown's bestseller book, now being promoted again heavily. You might have seen posters for it, maybe. The Da Vinci Code is part of the conspiracy to take down traditional Christianities. Now, Freemasonry developed from the Knights Templar, later joined with an organization called the Illuminati, which itself seemed founded in 1776 on July 4th. I know, the birth date of America, by Adam Weishaupt. What really happened, though, is Weishaupt just put together a new group to carry on the old traditions of a secret group that began in Babylon, ancient Babylon, and then on to Egypt, and then Greece, and that empire, all dating back to before the birth of Christ himself. Weishaupt was just passing the ancient secrets, you see, onto a new group who were given the job of implementing the master plan to set the stage for the appearance of this Al-Masri, Ad-Dajjal, or the Antichrist as you know him. The Illuminati formally came into existence in that year, 1776, in Germany. It happened on the same date as the Declaration of Independence, signifying the birth of the United States of America. And the man credited with this, starting this group, Adam Weishaupt, former Jesuit priest who had intricate knowledge of the secrets of the mystery religions of the ancients of Babylon. Weishaupt recruited other members for the cause, and a lot of his admirers, supporters, most of them early American founding fathers like Thomas Jefferson, Benny Franklin, George Washington, were all connected to British aristocracy. Come from British aristocratic families, their bloodlines. It was Weishaupt's Illuminati members that began the French Revolution, which ended the French monarchy and moved it on. The Illuminati organization has dissolved into a very highly secretive now rank of upper levels of Freemasonry. Masonry today, those members don't know what the Illuminati controls the highest level, because it's so secret and they're kept from that actual knowledge. So secret that unless you're an actual Illuminati member, an Illuminist, you're not even going to know about their control. The most famous of the then known Illuminists was General Albert Pike, a Confederate general of the American Civil War. Pike is the source for revealing a lot of the Illuminati mystery secrets that we know are in play today. Pike shaped the very secret of Illuminati into what it is today. We know through his correspondence with the European connections in the 1870s that the Illuminati planned 3 world wars and described what nations would even be involved, what role they would even play, and what the results were to be. He said it would take 3 world wars to pave the way for the Antichrist, the Savior, to come to save the world from destruction. He accurately described World Wars I and II nearly 35 to 70 years before they actually even happened, because they were planned. It's the plan. The Third World War was said to be between, isn't that strange, Islam, Judaism, and Christianity, with the entire Middle East to be set aflame in a staged fulfillment of biblical prophecies like, well, they're going to call it Armageddon. By the way, the first shot fired in this Third World War that's underway right now was 9/11. This war on terror is just an extension of it to keep it, give it legs. Now, where does this all lead us? This war is not against armies, yet it's against the citizens. Everywhere that there's a wedge to split us, pit us, one against the other, they'll drive it in. Computer, with its reach, with its speed of getting information out, getting into people's heads, is making it possible to war against every individual, to break you down so that you'll accept the solution to the problem. Their motto is, of course, out of chaos comes order. Whose order? Theirs. The media, the Illuminati-controlled media, is used for this specific purpose. The wedges being driven into all of us to divide and conquer daily, conflict between religions, global terrorism rising up here and there, the Palestinian-Israeli land dispute, attacks within Christianity by false teachers, preachers, controversy over abortion, attacks on the truths of the Bible, attacks on energy sources, the traditional energy sources, disruption everywhere, riots by Muslims across France, Europe, and Australia, controversy over suicide and right to die, sexual chaos developing to destroy the institution of marriage and family, sexual chaos to create gender chaos with women and men. Which one is it, man or woman? Exchanging divinely assigned roles. Chaos in abortion laws, chaos in drug use, chaos in wild weather, global warming, financial chaos in the stock and bond markets, the surge of earthquake activity, volcanic activity, financial chaos in foreign currency markets, geopolitical crises over nuke weapons in Iran and North Korea. Right now, I just named a few. Space, back with more in a moment. Talk Radio AM 640. Please direct your emails to spaceman at 640toronto.com or space at 640toronto.com. If you got some information you want to pass along, got a critique of the show, just like to refute my view, or just like to say where in the world you're listening to ABFS on Talk Radio AM 640 from, please feel free, and thank you so much for the one you've sent. So the Illuminati, as I've already stated, are working all angles now of the human experience to create chaos in order to bring about a new world order. A new order. Their motto, again, is order out of chaos. The strategy is to create chaos. By creating and controlling chaos, they can manipulate you into a conclusion that serves their ultimate goal. Oh, just what is that goal again? Oh, that's to bring about total enslavement of all of us and deliver an enslaved planet to their god, Satan, Lucifer and his flesh incarnate, the Antichrist that's coming, and his satanic one-world government. How do they create these points of chaos? By slowly inserting over what are sometimes long periods of time and developing their own agents. Is another one. Who are these agents? They're the agents that are human, who will serve the occult world of Satan's forces out of greed, or maybe out of lust for power, or just to keep what they've already got. Even if they don't believe in the actual purpose, they're comfortable in their life, so they don't want to change, and they'll just close their eyes and do the deed. They believe that Lucifer's forces are supreme. The master plan is called for the slow development of placing their agents into the Christian church as well as in the entire global educational systems, politics, leadership positions. Their people control the monetary systems now. They control the military. If you control the money, the government, the monetary systems, and the military, you control everything. You control the religious community. You control the media, the education system. You have the ability to control most of the entire world's population. But that's not Lucifer's final goal. He's not only wanting to control humanity, but also to worship him as the God of the universe, not the true God. The entire series of manipulations throughout history has been to bring about total worship, planet-wide worship, since the flood. Lucifer's come close to achieving that many times, but never completely. You see, he needs to manipulate events in such a way that the final result will be in his triumphant arrival through the Antichrist whom he possesses, who will end all of the chaos under such dire circumstances that every human being will be so grateful that will choose to worship him and obey him only because he saved them. So expect more of the same. Like cultural and religious and ethnic civil violence rioting, this will be the form of a race riot. See them in America. See them in Germany. See them everywhere. Protests like the Muslim hate for the Western world. The Western world's hate for the Muslim. This is just going to give us, of course, the Illuminati more reason for more terrorist attacks to move it even farther down the road. Then retaliatory attacks from both sides, and we can get the big one going. So they haven't played this card for a while, but they will. Don't worry, it'll be back. Exotic diseases that might engulf and overwhelm society as getting a lot of major media exposure in the Illuminati-controlled mass media psychologically prepare you with fear that such diseases could become so bad that it would destabilize society, leading to anarchy and the need for more authoritarian control by governments for the general welfare and safety of all citizens. In other words, you need dictatorship. You need a fascist leader in order to be safe from dying a horrible death from exotic diseases, which in reality were the designer-engineered ones in the scientific laboratories to begin with, but for which the public will never know or ever realize. Again, the bottom line goal is the general public to want, if not demand, authoritarian, totalitarian government controls over them. Then there's what I believe is coming soon, the collapse of economic and financial systems, which results in a restructuring of the wealth of entire nations in such a way as to remove wealth from the general populace. And let me just decipher that one for you. They call it the disappearing middle class these days. Remove the wealth from the general populace. Bankrupt the general population. Debt. Cards. Swiping. Your phone can sink you into such debt you'll never recover. Such developments pave the way for the public to beg to be taken care of in authoritarian governmental management systems. Oh, we've lost all our money, help us. Collapsing stock markets, banking systems, real estate markets, manufacturing, retail businesses under attack, creating high levels of unemployment. Possibly even starvation, which will lead to desperation by the public and a plea for governmental rescue. At the moment, the world's economy is teetering on the brink of collapse due to a wobbly global stock market situation. Oh, sure, they tell you there's growth here and there, but you know what? The money's cheap. 0% interest. In some places, 1% or 2%. Cheap money, and only given to the ones that don't need it. Global currency market's very unstable because the countries are in debt, so the money's not worth much. This kind of instability is what leads to collapse sooner or later. Cryptocurrency Bitcoin, almost over $7,000 US for $1 American dollar. One Bitcoin is worth a little over $7,000. The chaos is inherent in the entanglements of different nations like Russia and China trying to conduct significant trade. China wants Iran's oil, you know. Iran wants to sell China oil in exchange for military benefits, of course. Russia wants cash for technology and weapons. Then there's Iran's alliance with Pakistan, who is in its own ethnic struggle against India. On the back burner, Taiwan, and the Chinese wanting to annex it. Iran also puts its fingers into the Palestinian cause against Israel. That's been headlining this week very hot. The headline was that Prince Salman is stepping up the war in Yemen, the proxy war that's being fought against Hezbollah, who are really Iran or funded by them. And I've mentioned this before, the various individuals warning us, the world, that new secret technologies have been developed by nations and criminal elements which can alter and actually create destructive weather systems, such as super hurricanes that we've seen this summer, tornadoes, blizzards, through what's called scalar physics technology. This same technology can be used to trigger geological activity like earthquakes, the one in Mexico recently, the volcanic eruptions, tsunamis even. Scalar physics can also be used to create strange illusions in the sky when combined with other secret technologies, chemtrails. They can be used to create phony religious experiences. To take it even a step further, like the voice of God speaking directly to people en masse. That technology actually is available now. Through, of course, the story, have you heard about Cuba supposedly ruining the hearing of some American diplomats over there? That's what that technology is. You know, it shouldn't take much imagination to figure out the possible scenarios of these capabilities and that they can create the kind of destruction, the chaotic situations that they do. So those are the major chaotic wedges in the Illuminati's plans, which is going to be used over and over to further their goal. Hang on, because it's only going to get faster. Now, by far, the most asked question of me in my emails is Donald Trump an Illuminati member? The answer right off the top is yes. People say then, how come he's positioned as being the voice of the poor, the middle class, and champions all average people's beliefs? It's simple. It's Satan versus Satan. And the winner, Donald Trump in this case, parades around as the savior. Would you have evil fighting evil, and evil wins, calling itself the savior? They're using Donald Trump as the man who will appear to do the will of the people, not the special interest groups anymore, the way it was. But he's going to be showing not to be able to do it and fail, showing you that you cannot be a person who will close his borders, have everything pointing his way. He's the wolf in the henhouse dressed up as a chicken. It's the Spaceman's Talk Radio, AM 640. More next. I'm the guy they call the Spaceman's Talk Radio, AM 640. Shows a view from space. That's all it is. Emails to space@640toronto.com or spaceman@640toronto.com. Thanks for the one you sent. Now, because it is imperative, I mean, you have to grasp this at the top of what I'm about to get into here with you in order for you to completely understand what I'm going to present to you. You have to know simply the definition of really just two words. The two words are crypto and Judaizer. The first word is crypto, as it pertains to crypto jewelry. Definition of crypto is just this, in case you didn't know or you have to check. I'll check for you. It's a person who adheres or belongs secretly, keyword, to a party, to a sect, or other group, someone who belongs to a secret society. That's all, crypto. The other word you must know the exact meaning of to fully understand this concept is Judaizer. The word Judaizer has a Christian origin. It's taken from the Greek verb iudaizo, meaning live according to Jewish customs. This word is most widely known from the single use in the New Testament, Galatians 2, verse 14, where Paul publicly challenges Peter for compelling Gentile believers to Judaize. This event is also known as the incident at Antioch to knowledgeable Christians. According to the concise Oxford Dictionary of World Religions, this word includes groups like Jewish Christians, Cartodisseminants, Ethiopian Christians, descendants of English Puritanism like the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and others who claim the necessity of obedience to the Mosaic laws, which are found in the first 5 books of the Christian Old Testament. Through this is something likely disputed by members belonging to these groups, especially by the Seventh-day Adventist Church, also known as the Mormons. To them, the word Judaizers is a negative, a very bad thing. By the way, in America, the Republican Party actually had a Mormon running for the leadership of the party to be the President of the United States. His name was Mitt Romney, named after the hotel magnate J. Willard Marriott, his father's best friend. Yeah, the Marriott Hotel chain is owned by the Mormons. They also own Bain Capital, which owns Canada Goose clothing apparel. Oh, and many others. Staples. It's the elite, rich, and powerful who create religions, these people. They've always been in power. 1952, Mitt Romney's father, a former governor of Michigan, was CEO of American Motors, and his father's cousin, Milton Mitt Romney, was quarterback for Chicago Bears from 25 to 29, 1925 to 1929. The founder of the Mormon religion was Joseph Smith. We referred to him earlier in the show. And his inner circle of family members, they were all polygamists. They all married one another. They're sun worshippers. This was an original family of Cain's idea, by the way, polygamy. Lamech, as a matter of fact, was the very first ever polygamist on the earth. He's the 6th generation descendant of Cain. Genesis 4, verse 18, you'll find it there. His father was named Methuselah, and he was responsible for the Song of the Sword. He's also the first polygamist to take 2 wives. Their names were Ada and Selah. Tubal Cain is one of the sons. The Song of the Sword, by the way, is an ancient story. In it, the last part of the tale of Lamech in Genesis 4, verses 23 through 24, takes the form of a brief poem which actually refers to the curse of Cain. In the poem, Lamech's stance resembles that of a supreme warrior, able to avenge himself absolutely. But no explanation of who Lamech supposedly killed is ever given. Some biblical researchers have proposed that it's connected to the invention of the sword, the world's very first weapon, made of steel, not wood. Since his son Tubal Cain was the first blacksmith, which is, of course, the science of melting rock, extract metal, pound it while it's hot, cool it, and you have this weapon called the sword. That's the reason the poem is often referred to as the Song of the Sword. Of course, it's exactly the same today as it was then. Today, the greatest weapons belong to the same family of Cain, bloodline members. I just told you about one at the very top of the show, the XS-1, made by Boeing, going into production very shortly. That is an unmanned aircraft that can lift up 3,000 pounds and more into near-Earth orbit without the use of a rocket lifting it off from Earth, and lands just like an airplane. The XS-1. Also the F-18s, the F-35, the guided missiles, the weapons of mass destruction, as they're all called today, all belong to the family bloodline of Cain. This bloodline's father, who is Satan, has the same plan as he has had since the earliest of times, and that is to exact revenge on the true God by destroying all of the true God's creation. That includes you, me, and this very earth. What do you think has been polluting it for so long with his corporate poisons and blaming it on you? You didn't invent plastic bags. You didn't pump all the oil out and get everybody hooked on it. He now has the weapons to bring into the world a nuclear conflagration. This bloodline has successfully obscured the truth by hiding it in religions that have been mixed inextricably with what they call mythology, which is really their lies about their father and god Lucifer. They are now in the process of pitting those major religions against one another, called the Global War on Terrorism, which will morph into the Third World War, and this coming global conflict will be used to force the world's population into accepting their final kingdom here on Earth. The great work will be finished. That'll be run by Satan himself, who possesses a willful king, which will be the culmination of thousands of years of work toward this goal, which is the one world global empire under one king with only one religion. The other religions twisted, contorted, proven to be, and will no longer be needed. So let's see today how they've taken the religions and altered them. This current ruling empire we live under is called the American Empire. It's the economic engine of the world, still by most part the policeman of the world, but not for long. This one is about to crash, to allow the new one to arise. It's a story of the myth, the phoenix. They're acting out. The scarlet and golden phoenix bird is synonymous with rebirth and recovery, especially after calamity. Originally from the traditions of ancient Phoenicia, the original homeland of the tribe of Cain. The phoenix has a counterpart in many other cultures. The phoenix is said to have an entrancing song. In other words, it's convincing when you listen to it, captivating enough to make even the sun stop and listen. So if the phoenix is injured, it can heal itself. It enjoys a lifespan of about 500 to more than 1,000 years, just like the empires that they represent and are built by the elites. They considered the phoenix to be a lonely creature that cannot reproduce. And it is one of its kind only. So just as with empires in the world, there can be only one alive at a given time. When the phoenix reaches the end of its lifespan, it's said to build itself a nest of aromatic spices, and then sets the nest in itself on fire and is burned to ashes. Do you think this is not going to be repeated here for the American Empire? It will. Shortly, the phoenix will, though, rise again and begin its life anew. Out of the ashes rises the new empire, and in some traditions, the new phoenix gathers up the ashes of the old and takes them to Heliopolis to offer them to the sun god. There's sun worshippers that are leading our world today. The The American Empire was set up by Cain's descendants. After the Second World War, it's really the lion's whelp. The lion, of course, represents the line of Judah. Jacob assembles his sons before his death and speaks to them in a combination of blessings, curses, warnings, psychological assessments, parables, recollection of hope. He speaks to each son separately, too, in poetic language that certain scholars associate with the ancient tribal songs and memories. That when I return, it's Talk Radio, AM 640 on Space. It's the Spaceman and AVFS. Talk Radio, AM 640. Emails to spaceman at 640toronto.com or space at 640toronto.com. As I said before, the American Empire, the British Empire before that, all set up by Cain's descendants. The Roman Empire, the Greek Empire, the ancient Egyptian Empire, the Babylonian, same bloodline. So America was set up by the lion's whelp. It's really the lion's whelp. Represents the line of Judah. Jacob assembles his sons before his death and speaks to them. And a combination of blessings and curses is said before the break. Judah's first, fourth son of Leah, described by these famous words. Judah is a lion's whelp. On prey, my son, have you grown? He crouches, lies down like a lion, like the king of beasts. Who dare rouse him? The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet. The celebrated metaphor of Judah is a lion's whelp, meaning young offspring, of course, is one of strength, one of daring. The Lion of Judah has become a favorite motif, as a matter of fact, in Jewish art and folklore. It's acquired messianic associations. Yeah, I mean Messiah. The symbol of the Lion of Judah is a lion with a crown on its head. Tell me where you've seen that before, recall that before. Why, it's the symbol of the family that now resides in Buckingham Palace, who is also claimed to be the descendant of the house of David, from which King James' version of the Bible states the King of Kings to come must be from the house of David. They are in fact impostors, and are of the tribe of Dan, who is the family of Cain. But through their trickery and black magic, will be known to be able to trace their lineage back to the house of David. Through the Merovingian bloodline of Jesus Christ and Mary Magdalene having children, becoming the crowned heads, all the crowned head families of Europe. That's why the Da Vinci Code and Dan Brown is so important in these latter times. That's the blueprint. In the book of Deuteronomy, Moses blesses his people before his death. In the tradition and the spirit of Jacob's prophetic prayer, in Deuteronomy, that lion-like strength and prowess are applied to Gad and Dan, not to Judah. And of Gad, Moses said, "Blessed be he who enlarges Gad. Poised is he, like a lion to tear off arm and scalp." And of Dan he said, "Dan is a lion's whelp that leaps forth from Bashan." Dan, in fact, is compared to the same lion's whelp used to describe the powerful tribe of Judah in Genesis. Now more imposters. Here come the Church of the Latter-day Saints. Claims Mormons are descended from the tribe of Ephraim. This religion, an ancient one, began anew in America, where you could go to make up your own religion if you wanted, when America was founded. That's how they populated it. You don't like the religion you're at? Go over there, start another one. You can make yourself a god. It was in New York State where Joseph Smith, the founder of the Church of the Latter-day Saints, moved his flock of followers to Pennsylvania, then to Ohio, then Missouri, and eventually Illinois. When the Mormons were kicked out of Missouri, they settled in Illinois. It was there in 1844 Joe Smith announced his candidacy to run for the presidential office, President of the United States. That summer, after a newspaper criticized Smith's practice of polygamy, the Nauvoo, Illinois City Council ordered the paper to close. During the fight that ensued, Smith first declared martial law and then surrendered to the governor of Illinois. Although the governor promised his safety, Smith was murdered while he was in jail awaiting his trial to start in Carthage, Illinois. Mitt Romney's great-great-grandfather was none other than Parley P. Pratt. Parley P. Pratt was one of the first leaders of the Church of the Latter-day Saints in the early 19th century and originally a member of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. As all Mormons are in that day, Parley Pratt was a practicing polygamist, had 12 wives. One of his greatest great-great-grandsons, as I've already said, is Mitt Romney. Interesting, too, here. The Book of Mormon claims that Jesus appeared as the god Quetzalcoatl in South America, the New World. But history states the Catholic Church's conquistadors tried to obliterate all signs of the truth of Jesus Quetzalcoatl in the New World by burning the codices, the written word. But we're told they didn't destroy them all. Mitt Romney, isn't the only member of the Merovingian bloodline that's made a bid to become the President of the United States, Every single president they've ever had is part of the Merovingian bloodline. Because, you see, you're really not elected President of the United States. You're born to be. So if Judaizers play a major role in the formation and establishment of the Roman Catholic Church, is it possible that Roman Catholicism was a Jewish Kabbalist project from the beginning? There is, in fact, a long, fascinating history of Jewish infiltration of the Roman Catholic Church, which has been, nonetheless, and by clever design, too, perceived as a Gentile institution. If Roman Catholicism was a project of Kabbalist Jews for the purpose of subverting Christianity, it's conceivable then that Judaized church has functioned for nearly 2,000 years as a covert branch of Kabbalism, sun worship, black magic, Enoch, Judaism, whose handlers gradually and imperceptibly twisted and contorted Western Christianity to what we have today, with the many different watered-down and changed Bibles that have been printed, than was possible during the vigilant period of the early church, when only priests, if you'll recall way back when in history, were ever allowed to read the Word of God. Yes, it's totally obvious that Jesus, Mary Magdalene, and that lie is a deception of enormous magnitude for Merovingian claims to divinity, pointing to lineage from another source altogether. But that's what they're going to do, and DNA is going to be used in proving this fact. According to a Hebrew source for navigating the Bible, the sons of God were the Titans, the Nephilim in Hebrew, literally meaning fallen ones. They were called this because they were the sons of fallen angels. This demonic ancestry of the Merovingians is explicitly stated on Dagobert's Revenge in Edouard de Ligonaire's essay called The Biological Basis of Elitism and Divine Right to Rule. It's the all-important element of this whole game the elite are playing on us. This divine right to rule that comes from supposedly God or the gods, or who really were these gods? Authors like Zachariah Sitchin, the late Sir Lawrence Gardner, Nicholas de Vere were authoritatively convinced that kingship was created by an advanced race of beings called the Anunnaki, or the Nephilim, as I was referring to them in the earlier part of the show in the Old Testament. These were the ones who created the human race, interbred with them, and created this kingly caste, which were half man, half gods, these celestial creatures that have been variously identified with dragons, elves, fairies, even gnomes, leprechauns, sprites, nymphs, pixies, angels even, demons, devils, witches, giants, vampires, werewolves, all of those things. And just about every mythical being you can imagine. Some like Gardner and Sitchin actually claim they come from another planet. Others like De Vere say that they're multi-dimensional, or that they're from the hollow earth. According to the Book of Enoch, the Kabbalah is the prophet, translated by Richard Lawrence. The Nephilim are described as descending from Mount Hermon. And as recounted in the Dead Scrolls, in the days of Jared, 200 watchers descended on Ardis, the summit of Mount Hermon. Demons, a mythological location equated with the triple peak of Jebel Sheikh. That's about 9,200 feet hidden in a mountain placed in the most northerly region of ancient Palestine. The Dead Sea Scrolls, by the way, include the earliest version of the Book of Enoch too, which was rejected by the Council of Nicaea, which chose everything that went into your King James Version of the Bible. The scrolls were authored by the monastic Essene community of Qumran. In those days, the Essene would be akin to what we would call the green movement today. You know, all about nature. Believed to be the tribe of Dan, which brought back the pre-flood paganism, which brought back Baal worship to the Canaanites. The location of the Nephilim's descent, Mount Hermon, also called Mount Sion, by the way, is in the territory of Dan, whom I believe that tribe will the Antichrist come from. It's formerly the land of the Canaanites in northern Israel, according to the Atlas and biblical lands. Part of that tribe of Dan, unable to secure its inheritance, migrated north then and captured Laish, renaming it Dan. It's a Spaceman and a view from space on Talk Radio AM 640, with more to come right after this break. We got to call the Spaceman. This is Talk Radio AM 640. Emails, please send them to spaceman@640toronto.com or space@640toronto.com. I really appreciate the one you've sent. I really do, and I thank you so much for it. Now, according to the Book of Enoch, Kabbalah, prophet was translated by Richard Lawrence, the Nephilim are described as descending from Mount Hermon. Here's the actual words. And the angels, the children of heaven, saw them, handsome and beautiful daughters, and desired them, meaning the human ones. And they were altogether 200, and they descended into Ardos, which is the summit of Hermon, and they called the Mount Armon, for they swore and bound one another by a curse. That's in the Book of Enoch. As recounted in the Dead Sea Scrolls in the days of Jared, a couple of hundred watchers descended on Ardis, as it repeats what I've just talked about. In a different place, the summit of Mount Hermon, a mythical location equated with the triple peak of Jebel Sheikh, a mountain about 9,200 feet high, place in the northern region of ancient Palestine. Dead Sea Scrolls include the earliest version of the Book of Enoch 2, which was rejected by the Council of Nicaea, as I said before the break. And the coast of the children of Dan went out too little for them. Therefore the children of Dan went up to fight against Leshem, and took it, and smote it with the edge of their sword, and possessed it, and dwelt therein, and called Leshem Dan, after the name of Dan their father. This is the inheritance of the tribe of the children of Dan, according to their families. These cities with their villages. That's recorded in Joshua 19, verses 47 through 48. And they called the name of the city Dan, after the name of Dan their father, who was born unto Israel. Howbeit the name of the city was Laish at the first. That's recorded in Judges, Book of Judges, chapter 18, verse 29. The northern area of Palestine, Mount Hermon, happens to be located right smack dab in the 33rd degree, both latitude and longitude, according to the Paris zero meridian, by the way, used before the Greenwich International zero meridian that was established later on in 1884. But the original one, Mount Hermon, was at 33rd degree latitude, 33rd degree longitude. Saint-Sulpice, who died in 647, by the way, a contemporary of Saint Dagobert, also has the feast day on January 17th. He was the second bishop of Bourges, which is on the zero meridian of Paris, like Rennes-les-Bains, and was successfully in converting all of the Jews of his diocese. He was the protege of the goldsmith Saint Eloi, Grand Vizier of Dagobert I, who was a Merovingian bloodline member. And the famous seminary and church, dedicated to him in Paris, still to this day contains the obelisk with a copper line down the center marking the exact point to the meridian, Saint-Sulpice, and the grounds of the Saint-Germain-des-Prés. Had connections with the Priory of Sion, too, from its foundation. The zero meridian is, in fact, today's 33rd degree longitude. Monasteries, often fronts for the occult, as well as homosexual activity. The Merovingian infiltration of the Christian world was done through Monasticism, confirming many people's suspicions that many Catholic religious communities were steeped in Gnostic occultism, and that these Gnostic cults were actually points of entry for the Merovingian bloodline to be party to the papacy. Slip them in as the heads, control the church. St. Gregory the Great was the first of the 50 Benedictine monks who would become Pope. Merovingian Franks, around 450 to 741, built monasteries as a means of infiltration of the population. For Merovingian monasteries later became Benedictine or Cistercians. Pope Gregory the Great promoted Benedictine monasticism. His feast day is the day he became Pope, September 3rd. That was way back in 590 AD. This was accomplished by the infiltration of the church, and Gregory was part of that infiltration. September 3 then became a day of victory for the Red Movement, as it's called, when he was installed as their pope. For Gregory marks the history of the papacy in that he was the very first monk all time to become a pope. The origins of monasticism began are you ready? Where would you think? Monasticism actually began in Egypt. Hermes Trismegistus, the Greek Neoplatonist name for the Egyptian god Thoth, who was the founder of alchemy, geometry, the prototype of the hermit. You know, one that lives alone and is rarely ever seen. In the philosophy of Plato and the Neoplatonists, spirituality increased, and earthly values demonized. The famous Egyptian hermit, Saint Anthony the Great, lived from 251 to 356 AD, was the founder of the Eastern monasticism and mystery religion schools, as well as the founder of the most influential figure in the development of pre-Benedictine monasticism. In the 4th century, monasteries were taken and established all over Europe by Saint Athanasius, the Bishop of Alexandria, who was deeply influenced by Saint Anthony if you do your proper research. Anthony of Egypt, the strict self-denial practicing brother of the sun god and founder of Eastern monasticism. Demons permeate this guy's legend. He's passed one of the sheepskin cloaks, Anathasius, the spiritual head of desert hermits in Ethiopia, a bishop of Alexandria too, and father of orthodoxy. Athanasius had likewise given his cloak, which is, I guess, sort of like the order of the office in a as to what a judge would wear when he puts on his robe to preside over a court, or the clothing that a priest would wear to preside over his flock in the church. Anathasius had likewise given his cloak to Anthony and later wrote Anthony's biography, just as Gregory later wrote Benedict's. Anthony's feast day, January 17th, would become the sacred day for the Merovingians and that bloodline in the Priory of Sion organization, which members gather to celebrate on January 17th every year to honor Anthony's success at infiltrating the Christian world. Anthony's body would be buried, by the way, in Venice, France. It was Athanasius who introduced monasticism to the Romans and to the Germans. The rule of Saint Columbanus and Benedict in Europe were developed into major monastic communities by the Merovingian bloodline, who provided not only the monasteries themselves, but charters granting them complete exemption from church and government intervention, making them completely autonomous. So, Merovingians of ancient Egypt had assured the continuity of Egyptian error. Gibson hits the nail on the head when he wrote, "Swarms of monks arose from the Nile, overspread and darkened the Christian world." This is the Spaceman. It's Talk Radio, AM 640. There's more right after this. Please direct your emails to spaceman at 640toronto.com or space at 640toronto.com. Either way, I get them, and I thank you for them. Thanks so much for yours, the one you've sent tonight. So, Merovingians, very clever. This is the bloodline of Cain, by the way, who supposedly have the blood of the house of David in their veins from Jesus Christ, mating with Mary Magdalene. So the Merovingians of ancient Egypt had assured the continuity of Egyptian error when they... Well, Gibson, as I said before the break, hits the nail on the head when he wrote, "Swarms of monks arose from the Nile in Egypt, overspread and darkened the Christian world." so you know what he meant. Athanasius is known as the father of orthodoxy, too, by the way, and the theological center of the Nicene age. As the famous opponent of the Arian heresy, Athanasius valiantly defended the divinity of Christ, but he also taught that the incarnation of the word divinized human flesh made it possible for men to become gods. Did you hear me? Because that is key to the New World Order. It is possible, he said, for men to become gods. God became a man that men might become gods, wrote Athanasius, as a matter of fact. Arianism was condemned, and Arius, who was a Jew, was excommunicated at the Council of Nicaea in 321 AD. The Council of Nicaea, by the way, actually picked all of the scriptures that would go into the Bible and left others out. Although Athanasius led the bishops to contend for the faith as to the person of Jesus Christ, it was at this ecumenical council, the Council of Nicaea, that celibacy became a requirement for Roman Catholic leaders, as stated in the Catholic Encyclopedia itself. Other traditions of the Roman Catholic Church were adopted from Egyptian monasticism, too, under the leadership of Athanasius. Who else? For instance, virgins were now seen as exclusively as the bride of Christ. The deification of virgins led to the Blessed Virgin Mary, too. Virgin Mary becomes then the model for all virgins. Convents are established to teach. Vows of silence are then introduced because of Athanasius. Formal vow of celibacy is also introduced at that time. Inheritances are all given to whom? The Roman Catholic Church. Law. Pilgrimages to the Holy Land. Promoted, venerated sacred sites and mystical caves were also promoted. Bishops, priests were earthly representatives of virgins' heavenly bridegroom. It was said, written into the law of the church. Monks began to be appointed as bishops, establishing monastic communities as part of the church under the authority of bishops. It was conceivable that the Council of Nicaea, who picked all the scriptures that went into the Bible, later ecumenical councils, and the controversies leading to them were part of the process to remove Christianity from its scripture base, introduce a lie, to challenge another lie. The Nestorian controversy revolved around the question of whether Mary was the mother of God or not, or the mother of Christ, as stated by Nestorius. At the Council of Ephesus, 431 AD, Nestorius was condemned, and Mary was declared to be the mother of God. By the way, you may not be aware of this, but Ephesus was a center of goddess worship, where the Essenes established their school. The first known Illuminati order, it was called Ulambrado, was founded the same year that Columbus supposedly discovers the Americas, 1492. It was founded by Spanish Kabbalists called Marranos. They were also known as crypto-Judaizers. If you'll recall, sometime back in the show, I talked about that. You would have to understand what that is. A secret organization of people that were sworn to follow Mosaic law. With violent persecution in Spain and Portugal beginning in 1391, hundreds of thousands of Jews, you see, had been forced to convert to the faith of the Roman Catholic Church. Publicly, they were now Roman Catholics, but secretly, they practiced the Kabbalah. The Marranos were able to teach their children secretly. After 1540, a lot of us Marranos opted to flee to England, Holland, France, the Ottoman Empire, Turkey, Brazil, and other places in South and Central America. The Marranos kept strong family ties, and when they became very wealthy and influential in the nations where they lived, they had it as a custom with all Jewish people. It didn't matter in what nation they lived, their loyalty was not to that country at all, but to themselves and to keeping the Mosaic law. It's how the world government rules nations to this day. In 1492, Spanish Roman Catholics also expelled the last of the Muslims and Jews from Spain. The reason for the Spanish Inquisition, of course, buried under a mile-high pile of propaganda demonstrating against the anti-Semitism of the church. From 1000 to 1200 AD, the magically mystical system known as the Kabbalah, black magic power from Enoch himself, was developed mainly by African Jews, Sephardi Jews they're called, especially in Spain. The Inquisition was not directly against the Jews for practicing the Torah Judaism, but for criminal activities connected with the Talmud and Kabbalah. Even ritual human sacrifice was performed. Tantric sex magic was performed, for the Talmud directs Jews to exterminate Christians wherever they are finding them, and the Kabbalah contains erotic elements too. That's the Book of Enoch. Also in 1492, Christopher Columbus was funded by Kabbalists to explore the New World in search of a homeland for their persecuted brethren. August 2nd, the Druid feast by the way of Lunasa. In 1492, Christopher Columbus sets sail for the New World. Sponsored by the Grand Master of the Priory of Sion, Leonardo da Vinci, and funded by the wealthy Merovingian families in Italy of the last name Medici, who had placed their family members as kings and queens and popes. According to a cult conspiracy by Michael Howard, Columbus was association with a political group that supported the ideas of Dante, one of the alleged Grand Masters of the Order of the Rosy Cross, who's known to have used codes and ciphers in his writings, and a practice associated with membership of a secret society. Columbus' voyages of discovery were actually sponsored by Leonardo da Vinci and Lorenzo de Medici, both initiates of secret societies, who founded the explorer wealthy patrons among European royalty and aristocracy. So there's also speculation that Leonardo da Vinci was a part of the Jewish bloodlines too, the tribe of Dan. The nobility of a talented bastard, Leonardo, such was the caption of an article in the important Italian newspaper Corriere della Sera of October 1st of 2000. Yeah, just recently. Because you see, recent research maintains that the maestro of Vinci was born of a Jewess who came from Russia. Leonardo da Vinci's mother, a Russian Jewish woman. And so there's also evidence that Christopher Columbus was a Kabbalist. The Jewish scholar Eliezer Segal cites Columbus's biographer, Samuel de Magaria, that the Jewish historian Cecil Roth was providing the most compelling arguments in favor of this view. He wrote this: "There's been some weighty scholars debate over the possibility that Columbus, through undeniably devout and zealous Catholic faith, might also have been the proud descendant of Spanish Kabbalists. Ironically, this view has been championed by some patriotic Spaniards who would rather have him a Spanish Jew than an Italian Gentile." So you see, there's evidence that Columbus spoke Spanish while still living in Italy. An unusual situation, you'd have to understand, unless his family originated in Spain. And there were many Spanish-speaking Jewish refugees from the Inquisition, though, in the Genoa area. The name Colón, which Columbus adopted as the Spanish equivalent of his last name, was not the expected form, which would have been Colom or Colombo. It was, though, a Jewish variation of the name. Columbus was known to frequent the community of Jews and former Jews, among whom were some noted astronomers, navigators, as well as the official translator. Maranos figure prominently, of course, among Columbus's backers and the crew on that voyage. Throughout his life, he demonstrated a keen knowledge of the Bible and the geography of the Holy Land. In fact, in one place, he calculates the date exactly from the destruction of the second house, the Temple of Solomon, counting from the traditional Jewish date of 68 A.D. rather than the generally accepted 70th A.D. year. Now, the connections between the timing of Columbus's voyage to discover America and the expulsion of Spanish Jewry are indeed very, very curious. That's next when I come back on Talk Radio AM 640. Say VFS, I'm a Spaceman. More coming right up. I'm the guy to call a Spaceman. It's Talk Radio AM 640. Please direct your emails to spaceman at 640toronto.com or space at 640toronto.com. Thanks for that one you sent. Here's an example of how signs and lying wonders are able to deceive religious masses, even though the miracle worker has flagrantly denied the faith, violated the trust of his followers, exhibited a reprobate character. Moral liberation is often the rallying call of false prophets, isn't it? The foremost prophet of anti-omanism being Aleister Crowley, the occultist, whose Book of Law codified the moral values of the occult by reducing them to a single commandment. The only rule you have to live this life: do what you will be the whole of the law. In other words, man is God, your God, in your own life. What is right for you, no other man can intercede and say, no, that's wrong. You can't do that. No. You can do what you want, what you will. There was a Jewish person, a rabbi named Zabbatai Tzvi. He was also a prototype of the Antichrist, who will be a vile person, as recorded in Dan, chapter 11, verse 21, and a practitioner of black magic, Kabbalist magic from the Book of Enoch, and whose miracles will deceive the Jews with even greater success when he does come. So this coming Antichrist will be an adept and the occult traditions, possessing hidden knowledge, gnosis, and all the power of Satan for his supernatural displays of witchcraft. And in the latter time of their kingdom, when the transgressors are come to the full, the King James Version of the Bible states, a king of fierce countenance, and understanding dark sentences, understanding the occult ways, shall stand up, and his power shall be mighty, but not by his own power, but he shall destroy wonderfully, and shall prosper and practice, and shall destroy the mighty and the holy people. And through his policy also he shall cause witchcraft, to prosper in his hand, black magic, and he shall magnify himself in his heart, and by peace shall destroy many. Daniel 8, verses 23 through 25. And the beast which I saw was like a leopard. His feet were as the feet of a bear. His mouth is the mouth of a lion. The dragon gave him his power and his seat and great authority. That famous quote from Revelation 13, verse 2, King James Version of the Bible. In order for you to understand what events that happen, that they don't just happen. The Illuminati order was not invented by Adam Weishaupt, but rather renewed and reformed. As I spoke about earlier in the show, the first known Illuminator order, the Ulumbrado, was founded in 1492 by Spanish Jews called the Marranos, as I was saying. They were also known as crypto-Jews. In 1491, San Ignacio de Loyola was born in the Basque province of Gicozo in Spain. His parents were Marranos, and at the time of his birth, the family was very wealthy. As a young man, he became a member of the Jewish Illuminati order in Spain. And as a cover for his crypto-Jewish activities, his secret cultist activities, he became very active as a Roman Catholic. In 1539, he moved to Rome, where he founded the Jesuit order. Yes, the Jesuit Adam Weishaupt and Sabbatean Jacob Frank Svee, both having established viable subversive movements, were at that point. If they had not been bankrolled by another Kabbalist Jew, Mayor Amsel Rothschild in that particular instance, toward the end of subverting traditional Judaism as well as Christianity, it would never have happened. But it did. The Jewish Kabbalistic leaders were able to establish control over all world banking through the Rothschild family, and the political power was captured through the work of Adam Weishaupt. Here's how it was done. Mayor Amschel Rothschild, a rabbinical-trained German Jew who later took the name Rothschild, was firmly established in the German city Frankfurt am Main, with an emerging banking houses early as 1764. The leader of the Kabbalah at that time, Jacob Frank, a Polish-born Jew, by the way, in the family of Leibowitz, lived in the German city of Altenbach, just south of the city of Frankfurt, from 1773. Johann Adam Weishaupt, the founder of the Illuminati, the original one, from a Jewish family also that converted to the Roman Catholic Church, a Kabbalist, of course, was at Ingolstadt in 1770, a German city in Bavaria. With these three men, the stage was set to ignite a hellfire that would forever bring changes to this world you and I live in today. And those changes are still going on because that plan is almost come to fruition. this one world government. At this point in time, it's not known who supervised these three Jewish men, but it's obvious that someone directed their efforts. May 1st, 1776, just a couple of months before the Declaration of Independence in America. The Order of the Illuminati was founded by Adam Weishaupt. At this time, Weishaupt was only 28 years old. Amschel Rothschild was 32. Frank was, I believe, 50 years old. Meir Amschel financed Adam Weishaupt, and Jacob Frank laid the Kabbalistic theological foundation for the Order of the Illuminati. I believe that the head of all secret societies, directing this evil triumvirate from behind the scenes, was actually the Priory of Zion. Just as presently the secret societies are organized, and still are, and work in harmony under the direction of the High Cabal. Before this, his incarceration in a federal prison, Fritz Springmeier wrote in the Top 13 Illuminati Bloodlines book, The Prior of the Zion. The Elders of Zion also relates to the Rothschilds, by the way, who are reported to serve on a Jewish Council of Elders of Zion. Springmeier referenced George Armstrong's book, The Rothschild Money Trust, which states that is the present objective of Jeroboam Rothschild and his secret 300 Elders of Zion. And according to Eric Samuelson, Jeroboam Rothschild represented France as the in the Paris Peace Conference in 1919 under a Gentile surname. Also located in Paris was the Priory of Zion, by the way. Beer was the American expert in colonial questions at the Peace Conference in Paris with Lord Eustache Percy. He drew up a plan for the history of the Peace Conference, which was carried out by Harold Temperley. The British Round Table Group served at the conference as advisors to Prime Minister David Lloyd George in those times. The real behind-the-scene experts at the Paris conference included Michael George Mandel, real name Jeroboam Rothschild. Philip Sassoon was there, and Bernard Baruch. Beer was also named as head of the Mandate Department of the League of Nations as soon as it was established. And the mystery man was George Louis Beer. In 1776, Meir Amschel Rothschild would have been the kingpin of the Priory of Zion. Even though he's not listed as the Grand Master, and he is never mentioned in the books exposing the Priory of Zion, such as Holy Blood, Holy Grail, for example. The Messianic legacy, which the authors promote as meticulously researched, the Priory of Zion, or the Priory of Zion, is no doubt a religious front for the learned Elders of Zion, the High Cabal of the International Jewry, responsible for the Protocols of Zion, a strategy for world domination. Because you see, it's through action on Israel that this new world order is going to arise. Adam Weishaupt said of the Illuminati, another front of the learned Elders of Zion, as in the spiritual orders of the Roman Catholic Church religion, was only a pretense. So must our order, he said, also in a nobler way try to conceal itself, hide itself behind a learned society, or something of that kind. So anyone who has read the protocols of the learned Elders of Zion can actually discern the Rothschild plan and modus operandi for world conquest. After all, we just celebrated the 100th anniversary of Lord Balfour writing his 58-word letter to Lionel Rothschild, outlining the way to be able to create Israel, which they did in 1948. It's Spaceman on Talk Radio, AM 640. More next. Please send me your emails, if you care to space at 640toronto.com or spaceman at 640toronto.com. So anybody at all who's actually taken the time to read the protocols of the learned elders of Zion can quickly understand that the Rothschild plan and modus operandi for world conquest is right there, all there. Protocol number 5, section 4, bears an uncanny resemblance to the Illuminati plan to secretly direct the Jesuits from behind the scenes while discrediting the so-called Society of Jesus as a Roman Catholic Gentile organization. The same dialectical tactic is in use today. What's more, the art of directing masses and individuals by means of cleverly manipulated theory and verbiage by regulations of life in common with and all sorts of other quirks, in all which the Goyim understand nothing, belongs likewise to the specialists of our administrative brain, reared on analysis, on observation, on delicacies of fine calculation. In this species of skill, we have no rivals at all, any more than we have either in the drawing up of the plans of political actions and solidarity. In this way, the Jesuits alone might have compared with us, he says, but we have contrived to discredit them in the eyes of the unthinking mob as an overt organization, while we ourselves, all the while, have kept ourselves a secret organization in the shade. But it's probably all the same to the world who's its sovereign lord, whether the head of the Catholic Church or our despot of the blood of Zion. But to us, the chosen people, is very far from being a matter of indifference. The House of Rothschild, you see, is acknowledged to be the hidden hand behind the protocols of Zion, the Illuminati and the Order of the Priory of Zion. Rothschild is an eponym for Ruth's child, referring to Ruth, of course, in the lineage of David and Solomon, the house of David, the bloodline of which the Antichrist will come. In the Old Testament, Ruth, the Moabite widow, marries Boaz and gave birth to Obed, who became the grandfather of David. In Merovingian lore and Freemasonry, which would be the Windsors today, the titular head of that line, the son of the widow is the descendant of Ruth, who is believed to be the Messiah. Judeo-Freemasonry, in fact, teaches that Solomon was the Messiah. The lion that guarded the ark and held in his mouth the key wherewith to open it figuratively represents Solomon, the lion of the tribe of Judah, who preserved and communicated the key to the true knowledge of God, of his laws, and of the profound mysteries in the mortal and physical universe. The lion, Arai, as it's known, or Araya, which means the altar, still holds in his mouth the key of the enigma of the Sphinx. That's written in Albert Pike's Morals and Dogma book. The Freemason. The 121 elders and the Priory of Zion appear to be the overlords of the B'nai B'rith organization of today, which means sons of the covenant, by the way. According to well-informed sources, there is in the B'nai B'rith a superposition of secret societies ending in a single governing power. Above the B'nai B'rith are the B'nai Moshe, then the B'nai Zion, and finally the hidden center of the Supreme Command. Layer after layer of secrecy. The secret powers behind New World Order. So, returning to Deutsche Devils, although Barry Shamus exposes the Sabbateans and Frankists, he lacks the perspective of the Jesuits, were not a Gentile organization, but Jewish from the start. You have to look at, and keep this in mind, that Shamus is actually himself a Zionist who rejects not the Jewish state, but merely the secular leftist association of labor Zionism. The Israeli journalists is in favor of a religious or right-wing Zionism, which is more devoted to military expansion of the state of Israel. So, we continue in Deutsche Devils with the Zionist movement and the final act in the destruction of Judaism by the High Cabal. It was written this way. It was from Germany to London that the apostate Jews, Karl Marx, Friedrich Engels, were sent to devise the rot of communism. Shortly after that task was done, the Rothschilds sent their agents, John Jacob Astor and Jacob Schiff, from Germany to America. They financed the robber barons, like the Rockefellers, J.P. Morgan, who in 1922 founded the Council of Foreign Relations, by the way, to overthrow the American Constitution and switch the nation's diplomacy to the Illuminati control. In 1932, how many organizations in Germany represented German Jewry? Over 250. In 1933, how many? One. And one only. Labor Zionism, it was called. First, Rabbi Adelman's account continued. To corrupt the Jews, the Frankists adopted at first a humane policy of sorts. With Rothschild money, Jesuit power, the so-called Enlightenment was initiated by the German Jewish apostate Moses Mendelssohn. Napoleon was financed to liberate the Jews wherever he conquered, and from Germany. The reform and conservative movements were financed to further dilute the faith and introduce totally foreign concepts to their congregations. But the pace wasn't fast enough. The ornery Jews just weren't cooperating with evil. So those stubbornly accepting Torah morality would have to be removed and permanently, and only those practicing Shabbatanism would be permitted to survive. The Illuminati's view of an Israel. Yes, in the 2,000 years of European Jewish history, there were pogroms, crusades, inquisitions. The Inquisitions, aided and abetted by the Jesuits. But compared to what happened from the 1880s on, life was a pretty tolerable affair. The turning point in the final war, though, against the Jews was the founding of Zionism by the Shabbataeans. The final aim of the movement was to establish a Shabbataean state in the historical land of the Jews, thus taking over Judaism for good. To foment that idea, life had to be made so intolerable for Europe's Jews that escape to Palestine would appear to be the best option. The Cossack pogroms were the first shot in this campaign, and for them, the Frankists turned to the Jesuits and their influence over the Catholic Church. So the Jesuits had done more to spread communism, beginning with their feudal communes in South America, and now they wanted to punish the anti-papists, the Catholics of Europe by imprisoning them behind bars. The deal was simple. The Jesuits provided the programs, the Frankists, the communists, and naturally, the Rothschild would provide the money. Incredibly, the Zionists controlled the refugee policy so that only politically minded Zionist Jews were permitted to emigrate to Israel. Trapped in Nazi-occupied territories were those religious Jews who opposed the Zionist movement. All neatly set up, weren't they? Many for the biblical reason that the Messianic kingdom would not be established until the Messiah himself arrived. Jews against Zionism were represented by an organization called the Ugas Israel, which was founded in 1912, but sold out to the Zionists and was superseded by a splinter organization. Neturei Karta was his name, founded in Jerusalem in 1938, compounded the tragedy of the Holocaust with the fact that many countries, including most of the Allied nations, closed their borders to Jewish immigration, wouldn't let them in. In his book, The Six-Pointed Star, O.J. Graham elucidated the selective policy of those Zionists in those days. So from records, it seems that from 1933 to 1939, Jews were expected to leave Germany and all Nazi-occupied territories. But it was, at the same time, there's a very different selection system and a very restrictive immigration policy on who went where. Who went to Palestine? Headed by the Zionists. It's the Spaceman on Talk Radio, AM 640. More coming right up after this. I'm the guy they call the Spaceman. It's Talk Radio, AM 640. Please direct your emails to spaceman at 640toronto.com. One address, the other space at 640toronto.com. By the way, I get them if you send them from either of those two. And I thank you so much for the one that you've sent. So, as I was saying before the break, from 1933 to 1939, Jews in Germany were expected to leave Germany and all Nazi-occupied territories, but at the same time there was a definite selection system, very restrictive immigration policy on who went to Palestine. It was headed by the Zionists, which is headed by the Rothschilds. And it was Lionel Rothschild that actually established the state, gave them their flag, the six-pointed star, the hexagram, which is today's Israeli flag, and put that land there and those people back there and called it Israel to draw in the ire of the surrounding area and to make it a sore spot, a festering area which would eventually draw all the world's armies into a war. And they're about to get there to do it again. The very same ones that put Israel on the map in 1948. Lord Balfour, I recall speaking not long ago on this show about writing Lionel Rothschild 58 words. The hidden 13, get it? To create an Israel in Palestine. And now they're going to do the same trick again and create a Palestine in an Israel. Lucy Dawidowitz, in her book, The War Against Jews, had this to say at their 18th Congress in 1933. The Zionists established within the Jewish Agency for Palestine a central bureau for the settlement of German Jews, which, to begin with, excluded anti-Zionists as applicants for certificates. young people in good health with some training for agricultural work or manual trades, and persons with capital were the preferred candidates only for Aliyah in a process where the needs and interests of Palestine took precedence over the strategy of rescue of the people from the clutch of Hitler. Nathan Birnbaum was an early Zionist. In fact, he was the one who coined the phrase Zionism. It also represents Herzl at the First Congress of Basel. Birnbaum left the movement in 1899, became completely orthodox and absolutely hostile to this Zionist movement headed by the Rothschilds, backed by the British monarchy. In his paper titled Bondage to Our Fellow Jew, he wrote this: "It seems that we're better qualified for our bondage to the Gentiles than with our bondage to our brothers," meaning the Rothschilds and their ilk, who are estranged from the Torah and its teachings because they were into the Kabbalah, when our own estranged brothers, who next to us are the mere grain, not only persecute us but themselves give a handle to our persecution, when they not only meddle in our affairs but take them wholly out of our hands. When they do not only refuse to let us go our ways in peace, but actually try to obstruct our road forever. Birnbaum wrote those words in 1901. It's still going on today. Michael Zeltzer, in his book Zionism Reconsidered, says not even the events of 1933 aroused their political interest. He refers, of course, to the Zionist organization. They were naive enough to see them as a God-sent opportunity for an undreamt-of wave of immigration to Palestine. When the Zionist organization, against the natural impulses of the Jewish people, decided to do business with Hitler, to trade German goods against the wealth of German Jewry, to flood the Palestine market with German products, and thus make a mockery of the boycott against German-made articles, they found little opposition with the Jewish national homeland, and at least all among its aristocracy, the so-called kibbutniks, as they were called. How many Jews even know those facts? Another eye-opener is evidence that Adolf Hitler was not only Jewish himself, but the greatest grandson of a Rothschild. During World War II, a psychological analysis of Adolf Hitler, his life and legend, published by Walt Langer of the U.S. Office of Strategic Services, the OSS, forerunner of the Secret Service, as an attempt to screen the wealth of contradictory, conflicting, and unreliable material, as he called it, concerning Hitler, into strata, which would be helpful to the policymakers and those who wish to frame a counter-propaganda. Or to use Langer's words, how did a crazy paper hanger manage, in the course of a relatively few years, to talk his way into the highest political offices, hoodwink the experienced leaders of the major powers, turn millions of highly civilized people into barbarians, then order the extermination of a large segment of the population, then build and control the mightiest war machine ever known, and plunge the world into history's most devastating war? The only explanation could be that Hitler had family connections in high places. And wouldn't you agree? You know who Adolf's father was? Elwa Hitler. He was the legitimate son of Maria Anna Schicklgruber. And it's generally thought that the father of Elwa Hitler would be Adolf's grandfather, Johann Georg Hitler, a miller's assistant, Alwa, however, was not legitimized. Bore his mother's name, in fact, until he was 40 years of age when he changed it to Hitler. They're covering up lineage here. Names, always, by the elite rich, are changed to hide the real truth. There are even some people who seriously doubt that Johann Georg Hitler was the father of Alwa. Thiessen and Kohler, for example, claim that Chancellor Dollfuss had ordered the Austrian police to conduct a thorough investigation into the Hitler family. As a result of this investigation, a secret document was actually prepared which proved that Marina Anna Schicklgruber was living in Vienna at the time she conceived Adolf Hitler. At that time, she was employed as a servant in the home of Baron Rothschild. As soon as the family discovered her pregnancy, when the Rothschilds discovered that one of their maids was pregnant, she was sent back to her home in Spital, where Alwa was born. If this is true, that one of the Rothschilds is the real father of Alwa, Hitler, Adolf's father, it would make Adolf a quarter Jew. And according to these sources, Adolf Hitler knew of the existence of this document and the incriminating evidence it contained. So, in order to obtain it, he precipitated events in Austria and initiated the assassination of Dollfuss. According to this story, he failed to obtain the document at that time, since Dollfuss had secreted it away and had told a man called Schuschnigg of its whereabouts, so that in the events of his death, the independence of Austria would remain assured. Several stories of this general type are still in circulation today. It's the Spaceman on Talk Radio, AM 640. More right after this. I'm the guy to call a Spaceman. This is Talk Radio, AM 640. Communicate by email only. No website. No Twitter account. No Facebook page. Space at 640toronto.com or Spaceman at 640toronto.com. So, how about this? Alwa Hitler's father, born in 1837, in the period when Solomon Mayer Rothschild was the only Rothschild to live in the Vienna mansion. Even his wife didn't live there because their marriage was so bad that she stayed in Frankfurt. Their son, Anselm Solomon, spent most of his working life in Paris, too, in Frankfurt, away from the Vienna home and his father. So Father Solomon Mayer Rothschild, living alone in Vienna, in the mansion where Hitler's grandmother worked, is the prime, most obvious candidate. And Hermann von Goldschmidt, the son of Solomon Mayer Rothschild's senior clerk, wrote a book, published it in 1917. He said this in that book of Solomon. By the 1840s, he had developed a somewhat reckless enthusiasm for young girls, and he had a lecherous passion for very young girls, his adventures with whom had to be hushed by the police at times. And Hitler's grandmother, a young girl, working under the same roof, would not have been the subject of Solomon's desire? And this same girl became pregnant while working there? And her grandson becomes the Chancellor of Germany? Funded by the Rothschilds? Then he starts the Second World War, which is so vital to the Rothschild Illuminati agenda. Will take 3 world wars, remember, to create the one world government. After the First World War, there was only 43 nations in the League of Nations, it was called. After World War II, it morphed into what we have today, the United Nations, and 193 countries involved. The Illuminati agenda. And the Illuminati are obsessed with putting their bloodlines into power on all sides of a conflict. That's how you control both sides. And the Rothschilds are one of their most key bloodlines. Is all this coincidence? Here's another coincidence for you then. Nikki Hilton, just a couple of years ago, married the latest heir to this Rothschild fortune, James Rothschild. Where did they get married? At the home of Prince William and Duchess Kate Middleton, Kensington Palace, where Princess Diana lived, the new home of William and Kate. They were guests, Nikki Hilton and the bridegroom, James Rothschild. Altogether, you know, when you put Conrad Hilton's fortune together, along with the Rothschild fortune, you come up with, they're worth about $700 trillion. Got married in the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge's house, Kensington Palace. Bloodline members, I tell you. So, one thing is certain. Without Hitler, there would be no state of Israel today. I believe they're going to do the opposite again, the mirror image, just as in the occult, those occultist black magic practitioners, the spirit world and the physical world mirroring one another. I believe they're going to do it again with the state of Israel, as they make room for a new country called Israel in the middle of Palestine in 1948. They're going to make a new state of Palestine where Israel is, for the two-state solution which will send the world into World War III. Just how? I believe Hezbollah or Hamas, once the Jews sit down and negotiate the treaty, which will be for 7 years, Hamas or Hezbollah, after Palestine has given their land, has their own country, the two-state solution is in place. The Palestinians are moving back into their land again. Hezbollah or Hamas will attack Israel, and Israel will say, "We knew it all along. You just wanted to wipe us off the map and take our land, annihilate us." So they do a preemptive strike on Palestine, where all of the Palestinians have been lured back into one area and attacked by Israel, which will, leave the world aghast. And then they'll all turn on Israel for what they've done. Then we'll start World War III. That's how I believe this is to play out. Now, returning to the German triumvirate, which set the stage for the Holocaust, whatever became of the multitudes of Sabbatean and Frankist families who converted from Judaism to Catholicism in the 17th and 18th centuries? Well, when you consider that America was a sanctuary for European crypto-Jews, remember I told you about those words, following Mosaic law in secret, it is no surprise that some of the Frankists would turn up in the U.S. and land jobs in where? The highest levels of government, the highest levels of financial institutions, which then became the servants of the international Kabbalists and the Rothschilds and the elite Illuminati. Mary Shamish reveals just a few. A quote from Jerry Rabo. Frankist families, both those living as Christians and those living as Jews, tried to marry only among themselves. In the summers, the German groups regularly held secret meetings in the resort of Karlsbad. It's said by the middle of the 19th century, the majority, really, of the lawyers in Prague and Warsaw were from these Frankist families. The United States Supreme Court Justice Felix Frankfurter was reported to have received a copy of Eva Frank's portrait from his mother, a descendant of the Prague Frankist family. So as you can see, there's a migration to all the places where they set up business, you could say. Here's a quote from Frankfurter. The real rulers in Washington are invisible and exercise their power from behind the scenes. That's a justice of the U.S. Supreme Court, a former justice of the Supreme Court. The difference between Rabo and Rabbi Andelman is that Andelman proves that literally all of Franklin Delano Roosevelt's court judges were German-descended Sabbateans, determined to purge Jewry of its unnecessary European, non-Sabbatean morality-believing cohorts. A short list. Felix Brandes received secondary school education in Germany. There, Englishman Jacob de Haas introduced him to Zionism. Henry Morgenthau, Jr., Stephen Weiss, Judah Magnus, Felix Warburg, all descended from German Jews. And here's a telling quote from the Frankist family member, Felix Warburg. We shall have world government, whether we like it or not. The only question is whether world government will be achieved by conquest or by consent. Statement made before the United States Senate, the year 1950, by James Paul Warburg. The angel of the United World Federalists, the globalists, son of Paul Moritz Warburg, nephew of Felix Warburg, and of Jacob Schiff, who set up the United Nations, both of Kuhn Loeb and Company, which poured millions and millions into the Russian Revolution through James Brother Max, the banker of the German government. In another article titled Kerry, Gaza, a New Sabbatean Holocaust, Seamus updates the list by adding Madeleine Albright, John Kerry, the former Secretary of State, Wesley Clark, General Wesley Clark, that was your guide through the Afghanistan war, or the Iraqi war on CNN television. All are CFR members, Council on Foreign Relations, because the globalists run that organization, the CFR, and they have Gentile surnames. But, of course, somehow suffered memory loss or something when it comes to their Jewish parentage. And what did we recently discover? It was back in 2004, the U.S. presidential election. John Kerry is Jewish on his father's side. The last name is Cohen. Changed to the Irish Kerry. Somehow he forgot that his grandparents were prominent Jewish business people in Prague, and that his father is 100% Jewish. Ask yourself, do you know anyone who doesn't know his father's religious background? As rare as it must be, that affliction runs rampant in Council on Foreign Relations circles. Former Council of Foreign Relations Secretary of State Madeleine Albright also forgot that both her parents were Jews, even though she was raised in the Jewish home of their relatives in London. If you don't feel like these people are deceiving us and hiding something, and if they're hiding that much, there must be way more that they're hiding that we have no idea about. And put into such highly placed, powerful positions for such a long length of time? It's the Spaceman on Talk Radio, AM 640. There is a conspiracy for a one-world government. Please send your emails to spaceman@640toronto.com or space@640toronto.com. I really appreciate the ones that you sent me. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much for that. Yes, the statement was we shall have world government, whether we like it or not. The only question is whether world government will be achieved by the conquest of the world or by consent. James Paul Warburg said that. A U.S. Supreme Court judge. Yes. Getting back to John Kerry. Carefully groomed from young age. First changed his family name to Kerry from Cohen. Cohen, of course, shows Kerry's true heritage as Jewish. His superiors give him a fictitious Irish name. Great for political effect because Massachusetts, you see where he ran, had a strong Irish population. And you can add to the list, too, of current prominent crypto Jews. Are you ready? The now deceased, they tell us, Osama bin Laden, whose mother is Jewish according to another Israeli source. Bali, Australia, and the Mossad is the name of the book by Rose Cohen, appeared on an Australian publication back in 2002. Osama bin Laden was Jewish, full stop. That's the Saudi family, remember? Big construction company in Saudi Arabia. And of course, there is this secret, too, that the Sauds are not the enemy of Israel simply because they are related. Which is why they're very friendly towards the United States, which is, of course, the biggest ally, the best friend of Israel. Bin Laden, Jewish. Very close friend and a most watched eminent Israeli journalist said that, according to Jewish law, bin Laden was Jewish as his mother was Jewish. And if that's not enough, this irrefutably honest Israeli journalist said that bin Laden's mother's family lived in Israel and knew that bin Laden was Jewish a long time ago, but with the war hysteria, was never mentioned to anyone. Now, Maurice Pine partly recognized the dialectical process at work per the Protocols of Zion when he posited that crypto Jewry in the name of the Islamic world accounts for the tumult of the Middle East today. Of course it does. The phenomenon of crypto-Judaism did not remain only limited to the Christian world. You still find it in different parts of the Muslim world. Communities like of crypto Jews, as Cecil Roth wrote about, who records several examples of Jewish communities in which Hebrews who outwardly were Muslim men are in fact still secretive worshippers of the Mosaic Law. This means that the Jews have also introduced a fifth column into the bosom of the Islamic religion. This fact maybe could explain why the many divisions and uproar which has occurred in the world of Muhammad. In other words, having infiltrated the Christian and Islamic worlds, this group, the globalists, were in the position to implement Protocol number 17, as they call it, of the learned elders of Zion, throughout all Europe, and by means of relations with Europe states. In other continents also, we must create ferments, discords, and hostility. Therein we gain a double advantage. In other words, go in and create the chaos, to create the change. To those who hesitate to believe that the protocols of the learned elders of Zion, backed by Britain's royalty and banking cabal, represent a blueprint for world domination by a secret Jewish brotherhood, here's some sensible advice offered by Mrs. Cohen. A lot of efforts have been made to dismiss protocols as a hoax. Frankly, it matters not whether they are or aren't because of their astonishing reflection of reality. Read them and decide for yourself. Those protocols were first published in Russia in 1905 by Professor Sergei Nilus. In his introduction, Nilus stated that Protocol number 3 begins with a reference to the cycle of the symbolic snake by which we symbolize our people. It cannot be overstated that this guy, Nilus, misinterpreted the symbolic snake as the symbol of Judaism in general, but Genesis 49, verse 17, specifically identifies only one tribe of Israel as a serpent. Dan shall be a serpent by the way, an adder in the path that biteth the horse heels, so that his rider shall fall backward. It's important to remember that this distinction, in order to avoid misinterpretation, misrepresenting all Jews as the perpetrators of this evil scheme outlined in the protocols. No. These are just a handful of elite, secret society members who have a Jewish bloodline. Before presenting Professor Nilus's explanation of the symbolic snake, consider what this image really means in the occult tradition. The symbolic snake is the ancient symbol of the Ouroboros, the serpent biting its own tail. This symbol is represented in the logo of the Theosophical Society. A variation of the Ouroboros bears the inscription Petit Finis Aborigine, which means look for the end in the beginning. That phrase denotes the Gnostic plan to go back to the future, which they've drummed into your head, I'm sure. In other words, to go through time in reverse. First, of course, to be the Garden of Eden, and then back to creation. As New Age writer Tim Robbins stated, our purpose is to return to Eden, make friends with the snake, set up our computers among the wild apple trees. You see, the New Age movement, those people aren't happy with the plan of salvation that the true God had ordained. These Gnostics believe that they are gods, and they have devised an alternative plan to fulfill Bible prophecy. Even this getting back to the garden, famously written into one of the verses of one of the biggest songs of all time, Woodstock. So the Ouroboros illustrates the nature of the Gnostic conquest to Christian civilization. In his introduction to the Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion, Nihilus charted with uncanny precision the geographical course of the symbolic snake. Protocol number 3 calls for the openness with a reference to the symbolic snake of Judaism. In his epilogue to the 1905 edition of the Protocols, Nihilus gives the interesting account of this symbol according to the records of secret Jewish Zionism. Solomon, another Jewish learned man already, in 929 BC, thought out a scheme, in theory, for a peaceful conquest of the whole universe. Professor Nihilus seemed to be referring to the 8th chapter of the book of Ezekiel, to whom God gives visions of the temple where the Jewish elders conducted idolatrous rites sanctioned by Solomon, King Solomon, who promoted the worship of Astarte, Diana, Ishtar. And history developed. So this scheme was worked out in detail, and later completed by men who were later initiated in this question. Those learned men decided by peaceful means to conquer the world with the slyness of the symbolic snake, whose head was to represent those who have been initiated into the plans of the Jewish administration, and the body of the snake to represent the Jewish people. This is a questionable view in the millions of Jews slaughtered by the Zionists, I'll tell you that now. The administration was always kept secret, even from the Jewish nation itself. As this snake penetrated into the hearts of the nations which it encountered, it undermined and devoured, in fact, all the non-Jewish power of these states. So it's foretold that this snake has still to finish its work, strictly adhering to the design plan until the course which it has to run is closed by the return of the head to Zion. And until, by this means, the snake has completed its round of Europe and has encircled it. And until, by dint of enchaining Europe, it has encompassed the entire world. This is Spaceman, Talk Radio AM 640. I'm the guy to call the Spaceman. Talk Radio AM 640. Emails to space640toronto.com or spaceman@640toronto.com. Final segment tonight's show. So I said before the break, I must say it again. It's said that the snake has, of course, still got to finish its work, strictly adhering to the designed plan, which is world domination. Encompass the entire world. This is to be accomplished, by using every endeavor to subdue the other countries by an economical conquest that is beginning to show its ugly head now with all of these non-trade deals that have been showcased all this week. The return of the head of the snake to Zion can only be accomplished after the power of all the sovereign of Europe countries have been laid low. That is to say, when, by means of economic crisis, wholesale destruction effected everywhere, there shall have been brought about a spiritual demoralization and moral corruption, mostly with the assistance of men and women masquerading as French, Italians, like porn stars of the Passion of the Christ. These are the surest spreaders of licentiousness into the lives of the leading men at the heads of nations. A map of the course of the symbolic snake. Its first stage in Europe was in 429 BC in Greece, or about the time of Pericles. The snake first started eating into the power of that country. The second stage, Rome, at the time of Augustus, about 69 BC. The third, Madrid, in the time of Charles V, 1552. The fourth, Paris, about 790 AD, and the time of Louis the 16th. The fifth, London, England, from 1814 onwards, after the downfall of Napoleon. The sixth, Berlin, 1871, after the Franco-Prussian War. The seventh, St. Petersburg, over which is drawn the head of the snake, under the date of 1881. An actual same as it is forwards as it is backwards, 1881. Yes, the Illuminati just love those. This snake is now being drawn through the Americas and in the United States of America. It's being partially identified as the Council on Foreign Relations. It's fitting that the Aurora Borealis was originally a symbol of ancient Greece, the first stage of the European conquest by these globalists, these Kabbalists. The second stage in the circular route of the symbolic snake was the conquest of Rome in the 1st century BC, which corroborates other evidence that the Zionists established themselves in Rome centuries in advance of the creation of the Roman Catholic Church. Spain in 1550, a stronghold to the first creation of the Illuminati, and France in 1790 was in the throes of the French Revolution. Britain, Germany, Russia virtually completed the circular path of the symbolic serpent in Europe, which was devoured by the end of the 20th century. Because Protocol 3 begins with the announcement, "Today I may tell you that our goal is now only a few steps off. There remains but a small space to cross on the long path we've trodden before the cycle of the symbolic snake by which we symbolize our people will be completed." Don't believe in this conspiracy thing? The Merovingian dynasty, in power today, the titular head bloodline of the tribe of Cain, are moving closer and closer to the finish of getting back to their future. The Merovingian dynasty were the masterminds behind the Renaissance. René d'Anjou was the Angevin monarch who, at that time of the Renaissance, single-handedly spearheaded a Hermetic revival in Europe. It was he who personally convinced Cosimo de Medici to translate a lot of ancient texts like the Corpus Hermeticum, into various European languages for the first time ever to spread the propaganda. The Angevins were primarily advocates of the Regia, or royal art of Hermeticism, a tradition which, according to legend, was passed down to man by a race of fallen angels. Anjou was a Jewish province in France, too. The word Angevin, or Angevin, is the name applied to two distinct medieval dynasties that originated from Anjou. Angevin is also associated with angels, which may explain why this Jewish bloodline had more than just a passing interest in the writings of the Nephilim. The Angevins, you see, were a senior branch of the Merovingian bloodline, whose members viewed themselves as divine descendants of the fallen angels of Genesis 6. Angevin, angel, and divine, the two words mixed. The Jesus-Mary Magdalene blood connection heresy is really the exoteric doctrine of the Merovingian race, and an occult blind for religious masses. The esoteric doctrine, known only to the initiated, of course, is the descent, lineage of the Merovingian race from the fallen angels of Genesis 6, all the way up to today, whoever has that purest blood. Which explains why the founder of the dynasty, King Merovi, the first of the Merovingians, is said to have been sired by a mysterious sea beast, Pallas, or the beast out of the sea, as it's said in Revelation 13, verse 1. A book titled King John by W.L. Lauren actually depicts the Angevins as literally having demonic ancestry. Lucifer as their father, going back to ancient times of the bloodline of Cain, of course, because Cain had a twin, which was Abel, both in the womb at the same time. But Cain was from the serpent seed, and Abel was from Adam to Eve. So from the devil they came, to the devil they'll return, it's said. There are many people who agree with that. In his book, The Top 13 Illuminati Bloodlines, Fritz Springmeier connected the de Medici family with other Merovingians as co-founders of the Priory of Sion. The original start of that Priory of Sion appears to have been the idea of a number of powerful bloodlines, included in it various descendants of the Merovingians, including the House of Lorraine, the House of Guise, the Medicis, the Sforas, the Estes, the Gonzagas, and the Sinclairs. The Medicis are tied to the black nobility also. From the beginning, the Priory of Sion has committed to Hermetic magic. René d'Anjou, a descendant of the Merovingians, persuaded Cosimo de' Medici to establish in 1444 a non-church library at San Marco, where Plato, Pythagorean works, and books on Hermetic magic were actually translated. Up until that time, the Catholic Church had control of all literature, all libraries. It was from Cosimo de' Medici's library that the spark of Greek and Egyptian teachings set off what developed into the Renaissance, which was a revival of humanism and the occult practices of black magic. It appears that the Middle Ages, witchcraft, and the mystery religions had seriously devolved into the point where these modes of thought had to be relearned from the ancient writings. What's really intriguing is the Middle Ages, when witchcraft and paganism were dissolving, having been branded the Dark Ages by the establishment and inaccurately painted as a time when when learning went out the window. The Priory of Zion is the secret society in Paris which oversees all other secret societies. It is the mysterious Illuminati, which had its origins in the Society of Ormus, which was birthed in, Alexandria, Egypt. Why do you think you see all of the Egyptian imagery in our Illuminati-controlled media today? Once it relocates to Calabria, Italy, then the terms the Illuminati and the Ormus both mean illumined or lightened. These were the Calabrian monks who removed to the Ardennes forest in France, Merovingian property, and settled on the domains of Godfrey de Bouillon, another Merovingian name, who led the first Crusades into the Middle East to start all of what you and I are living in today, because the Crusades are coming back. Soon to be the 21st. This has been a View from Space on Talk Radio AM 640. I'm Spaceman. I'm out.